Two titans of industry, Linus Tech Tips, a company that is now in excess of 100 employees, and Gamers Nexus, two companies that many people, including myself, have trusted for a lot of years and have enjoyed for a lot of years and have enjoyed watching them grow and seeing their channels turn into these businesses and all the great opportunities that they're able to provide. And you know, exactly what they've become has been an amazing thing to watch. And what I think's been interesting over the past couple of days as the TLDR essentially is Gamers Nexus put out a 45-minute video that essentially pointed out multiple instances of both sloppy reporting / editing, as well as some questionable ethics issues, as you know, for example, Linus Tech Tips investing in a laptop company, a company that he also covers on his channel and covers its competition, of some sketchy behavior around a prototype that Linus Tech Tips got and sold instead of giving back to the original creator, and some editing issues, simple oversight issues. I think the issues range in severity. In the original video yesterday, the problem with Linus Tech Tips, the Gamers Nexus talks about that the Linus Tech Tips employees all agree in their own video interviews that they all wish they had more time to produce content and thus be able to spend a little bit more time on it. He alludes to somewhat directly, Gamers Nexus that is that Linus Tech Tips has a extremely arduous output schedule. They push a lot of content out, and oftentimes when that happens, you end up with mistakes. And then he goes through several GPU errors, GPU reviews or video card reviews, where Linus Tech Tips had some obvious issues, obvious errors in the way the graphing showed that somebody in editorial should have seen before they were published. Now, this is an issue, in my opinion, that is more on the lighter side of things. Making an error in a video is what it is. You do your best to correct it. But Gamers Nexus also takes umbrage, and I believe fairly so, with other tests like their CPU cooler tests, where certain bits of data, when you look at it, should be pretty obvious that there's an issue, that they made it through editorial. And again, mistakes get made, especially when you are pushing out massive amounts of content. However, one of the issues that Gamers Nexus puts out is the way in which Linus Tech Tips deals with potential corrections. So you spend a lot of money on a video. You can use, if you're a big channel, sometimes you can use some of these fancy YouTube tools that not everyone has access to, where you can replace the entire video or sections of the video. You can also trim segments, which most of us can also do. But what Linus Tech Tips often chooses to do is simply put a quick text asterisk on the screen to acknowledge a misspeak or an error. The problem with this is if you're only listening to the video, you're probably not going to see it, and a large percentage of people just listen to it. Secondarily, this form of reporting your own errors does not do much of anything at all to go back and correct the millions of people in Linus Tech Tips case who have already seen the incorrect information. He had also shown several times during product reviews where he had done a review on a particular GPU cooler device and essentially knowingly put it on a video card in which it was not compatible for, and then proceeded to basically call it a piece of junk. Curious that he took that piece of junk and then auctioned it off. So these errors are more on the things that are more egregious. If your entire company depends on a reviewer, a tech reviewer, using your product properly, they willingly do not do so, and then say your product doesn't work, I imagine that's pretty rough. Now, this was just one example that Gamer Nexus put out there, in which Linus Tech Tips then also, again, auctioned off this prototype, which was very bizarre because they were supposed to return it. That said, they didn't like the item. They essentially shredded it in reviews, probably destroying that entire company. He also talked about another example where a mouse reviewer is failing at some very basic things. There were some plastic stickers allegedly on the bottom of the mouse, and they used it and they said, hey, this thing's a piece of junk. It's not very smooth. Well, they never took the stickers off. Simple stuff like that. Now, when you get caught up in massive output, look, even on my channel, I do 5 videos a day on YouTube and Rumble and BitChute and Odyssey, as well as a live stream. I make mistakes too. However, when you have these large channels and you have the power that Linus does to make and break brands, I don't think, and Gamer Nexus didn't think, that it was a sufficient correction to simply throw an asterisk up on the screen real quick or pin a comment. On top of that, there were situations where Linus did kind of stealth edit the video, where they replaced a section. But again, these type of things many believe should be retracted entirely, and a second video or a more formal correction like a YouTube community post, a tweet, email, something to make sure that people really got really understood, because people are making purchasing decisions based on these reviews. Now, what is the most concerning of all these to me? You've got small oversights. You've got the laziest possible way to correct mistakes, which when your Linus Tech Tips and company's futures, hang in the balance of what your reviews say, you have a little bit more of responsibility. These are two annoyances that I think Linus Tech Tips can very easily fix, and I think they will. The Gamers Nexus talks about how Linus Tech Tips, much of this is probably not with malice. I'm not going to ascribe. It's not like Linus is saying, I'm going to make these things, inaccurate on purpose, and I'm going to do the minimum. I think what you have is a massive demand on output. Now that Linus Tech Tips is, Linus isn't even the CEO anymore. It's some huge super mega corporation, and there's minimum requirements for content and all this kind of stuff that happens. This is where errors come in. You have a demanding turnaround schedule for employees. They do the best they can. They make errors. And if you don't have enough editorial staff to catch them, this is what happens. So in Linus Tech Tips stand, I don't hate the guy. And I also don't think that he did these things with malice. He's made some off-the-hand remarks that Gamer Nexus pointed out about not wanting to invest extra man hours to run tests properly when he finds out he has to redo them, which is not a great take. But I think Linus will respond. I hope he will respond well to this. However, he did put out a comment in regards to this feedback, and it wasn't very well written. Linus admits to sloppiness in Gamer Nexus response, but lashes out at public criticism. Now, again, I will say I don't hate Linus. I don't think he should be canceled. I think this is a great wake-up call for a company that has 100+ employees and deep connections at super huge mega corporations, that he can just add some editorial staff. I don't think he deliberately misled people. The idea that he has sponsorship deals with the very same companies he's supposed to be unbiasedly reviewing, this is an issue, but I don't think anyone's really ever said Linus is, that he hasn't been unbiased. This has not been a huge thing that has been levied against him, at least in this criticism. It's just the potential for it. When you're reviewing an NVIDIA card and you make blanket statements like, it's NVIDIA, everything's good, that they make, people will look at you sideways, especially when then they sponsor an event and they send you graphics cards early, things of that nature. This happens to almost all review companies when they get big. So he puts out this statement. He says, to my team and my CEO's team, but realistically, I was at the helm for these errors, so I need to own it. I stress the importance of diligence in our work because there are so many eyes on it. We're going through some growing pains. We've been very public about the interest of transparency, and it's clear we have some work to do on the internal process of communication. I think this is a great response. It's very fine way to say it, and if he makes these editorial changes, I really don't think there needs to be anything else beyond this in terms of Linus Tech Tips. He then writes, now for my community, all I can say is the same thing I always say. We know we're not perfect. We wear our imperfection on our sleeves in the interest of ensuring we stay accountable to you, but it's unfortunate when this transparency gets warped into a bad thing. The lab seems hard at work creating processes and tools to generate data that will benefit consumers. Work in progress that is very much not done, that we're communicating. So there are some people in these who have read this and said, let's not. It reads like you're maybe playing the victim a little bit too much. But in the world of online apologies, I can tell you this as someone who's covered them for many years, almost never are they universally accepted and done right. He talks about the Billet Labs video in which they returned. That's a very weird situation where they were supposed to return the prototype, never did. And then he said, we're going to send them some money. But he only agreed, seemingly according to the timeline, to do so after being called out by Gamers Nexus. I think that this is just some growing pains, to be honest with you. I don't think that Linus is an evil guy or that things just happen. And you say, we're continually installing new checks and balances to ensure. Part of the thing when you need editors or editorial staff, you need people that also understand the product. And that sometimes is hard to get. The part people are taking more umbrage with is rounding out the response. Linus admitted he was saddened by how quickly the pitchforks were raised over this, with thousands helping circulate the video and countless more lashing out on social media. He described the situation as disheartening to see how many people were willing to jump on us. Believe it or not, I'm a real person. I think if it were me, I would have left that out of the apology. I would have responded by saying, wow, these are unacceptable errors. We're immediately doing X, Y, and Z to get them fixed. Almost nobody gets apologies done right. What's going to matter is if Linus actually gets the systems in place and addresses these, then it's not going to be a big issue. I don't think Linus is a bad guy. I don't think he did these things on purpose. I just think the hunger, the content hunger, the algorithm has led to these mistakes, and he needs to just tighten up his ship. And I think he's still a massive force for good in the space, and as well as Gamer Nexus, which always does an amazing job. I hope that helps kind of summarize everything going on. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe or follow down below. I cover all sorts of things, and we'll talk to you again real soon.